Just over several hours ago, on the anniversary of the Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity, after less than a year and a half of relentless fighting and indiscriminate bombings across Ukraine, the Ukrainian armed forces have done what many had anticipated and some who had previously thought impossible. Ukrainians have successfully pushed Russian forces out of their sovereign territory once and for all. In addition, the Ukrainian government has claimed they have also recaptured both the Donbas region and the Crimean Peninsula. Their claim has been verified by journalists from numerous international sources. The military invasion on Ukraine began on the 24th of February, just about less than 2 years ago, when Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched a full-scale military invasion in Ukraine, shortly after making a televised statement in which he challenges Ukraine's right of statehood and had long been making claims that Ukraine is part of the Russian Empire as one people. This has been part of a 9-year-long war between Russia and Ukraine that had erupted since the successful revolution in 2014 that led to the removal of former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. With the relentless and impressive leadership capabilities of Volodymyr Zelensky, its guerrilla-style tactics employed by both Ukrainian armed forces and irregular militias, and help from military aid from various Western nations, they were able to score devastating blows against the might of the Russian army, primarily because of the latter's initial missteps and failures in logistics, tactics, formation, and the equipment, but as according to investigators and military experts, it was also because of corruption within the military and government. Almost immediately before the official statement was to be announced by President Volodymyr Zelensky, crowds have gathered and celebrated with great jubilation and nationalistic pride across Ukraine, as they are aware firsthand that the Russian troops are now finally out of the country.
Here with our morning news breaking in, we have been receiving reports that there are pro-Russian demonstrations taking place in downtown Chattanooga. Officials say that this was formed shortly after a social media post on an app called X, formerly known as Twitter, encouraging pro-Russian supporters to stand up against what they called Nazis, as a direct response to the conclusion of the Russian invasion of Ukraine that ended in Ukraine, successfully driving the forces out from the country. Estimates put over at least 250 or 600 people participating in these protests, with unconfirmed sources putting over less than thousands in total. According to organizers there, they, along with some of the relatively unknown social media users and influencers supporting Russia, are calling for Ukraine to hand over 4 Ukrainian oblasts, Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, regions that Putin had once annexed to be part of Russia in the September 2022 referendum that was widely considered a sham, according to the international community, but pro-Russian protesters and supporters fiercely denied any form of recognition that these aforementioned regions are part of Ukraine. They had also demanded that the Ukrainian army should leave the Crimean Peninsula, and they had repeatedly sent demands, calling for NATO troops, who had been stationed near Ukrainian borders in the onset of the Russian invasion, to pull back to its pre-1990 borders in Western Europe, specifically within the western part of Germany, with a few even demanding that NATO should be disbanded entirely, and its West leaders be held accountable for their crimes of aggression and war crimes associated with imperialism and totalitarianism. The Chattanooga Police Department has deployed riot police to try and effectively control the crowd and contain the situation as calmly and orderly as possible. So far, the protests have been relatively peaceful, with little violence reported. However, given the nature of the protests and the political climate of this situation, it is likely that this may change at any moment. The chief of the Chattanooga Police Department stated that because of the aftermath of the war situation in Europe and the subsequent political upheaval, it is alleged that these protesters are trying to stoke pro-Russian propaganda, according to intelligence and cybersecurity agencies, and that it is believed they are trying to incite instability in the area by encouraging other potential pro-Russians there to join in these protests, possibly wanting to prolong the war. As a result, they are considering this protest to be an illegal gathering, and the police must handle the situation accordingly. Across the country, small-scale pro-Russian protests and demonstrations are reported in several major cities, such as New York City, Chicago, Salt Lake City, Austin, San Diego, Los Angeles, Seattle, Phoenix, Detroit, Milwaukee, and Alexandria, numbering at least hundreds of participants. Internationally, there are similar instances occurring in eastern Ukraine and in parts of Europe, such as Germany, France, Serbia, and the United Kingdom.
The following message is transmitted at the request by the Oakland County Sheriff's Office and the Michigan National Guard. Since 10:05 p.m. Central Standard Time, the Oakland County Sheriff's Office has reported civilians causing civil unrest and causing property damage and injuries in downtown Pontiac and in some parts of Oakland County. It is reported that civilians from different groups between pro-Kremlin supporters and pro-Ukrainian or anti-war supporters are clashing against one another on the streets as a result of the Ukrainian victory in the Russian invasion of Ukraine several hours ago. The Oakland County Sheriff's Office has been trying to contain the situation. It may become necessary to initiate a curfew or to institute martial law should the situation worsens, particularly if the rioters spread into other areas. All Oakland County residents are ordered to stay in your homes for the rest of the day. Do not start or participate in any riots. Doing so may put your life at risk of serious injury, certain death, or arrest without counsel. If you have a life-threatening emergency, call 911. Once again, do not start or participate in any riots, or you may put your life at risk of serious injury, certain death, or arrest without counsel.
If you're going to find yourself out here, at least have the capability to find your way out.
The following message is transmitted at the request of the Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, and the California National Guard. At approximately 5:45 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, the Los Angeles Police Department has reported instances of civilians in or near the University of Southern California, Los Angeles Convention Center, Pershing Square, and MacArthur Park causing civil unrest resulting in damage to property and injuries. Most of these cases reported to police comes from a spate of assaults and other crimes committed against civilians in addition to arson in some areas, though the exact motive is not immediately known. The LAPD is attempting to handle the situation. However, the LAPD and the City of Los Angeles request that all Los Angeles residents take the following actions. Return to your homes and avoid traveling unless absolutely necessary for the rest of tonight. Close and lock all windows and doors. Barricade them to the best of your ability. If one of the rioters enters your home, you may take any means necessary to protect life and property, including lethal force. However, vigilantism will not be tolerated, and attempt to contain rioters or assaults on the spot will result in arrest. Do not participate or start any of the riots or you will face risks of arrest without counsel with the fullest extent of the law or you will be shot and killed on the spot. In the event should the situation does not improve or worsen, the California National Guard may be requested for deployment in the city as a necessary measure to restore law and order and to protect life and property, and curfews or martial law may follow. Repeating, at approximately 5:45 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, the Los Angeles Police Department has reported instances of civilians in or near the University of Southern California, Los Angeles Convention Center, Pershing Square, and MacArthur Park causing civil unrest resulting in damage to property and injuries. All Los Angeles residents are requested to return to your homes and avoid traveling for the rest of tonight. Act now to protect your life.
This is KO Memo from ABC News 4. On our radio broadcast, breaking news this afternoon. At least 40 people in downtown Seattle were injured during the clashes with riot police in the neighborhoods of Pioneer Square and Belltown, which a few hours ago was initially a peaceful demonstration. Outside Washington, pro-Russian demonstrations, which had erupted following the failed invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, were reported across 36 states, with the most affected being New York, California, Texas, Ohio, Idaho, New Mexico, Massachusetts, Louisiana, Maine, and Washington, D.C., as several small-scale demonstrations and occasional clashes between riot police and the pro-Ukrainian and anti-war camps are taking place. One most notable of which was in New York City, where video footage captured by bystanders shows one of the pro-Russian protesters being dragged into a police cruiser as he was being under arrest, with other protesters and bystanders watching in the distance. He was seen resisting, and as he was right beside the cruiser, he began yelling, claiming that he had a right of protest as part of the United States' First Amendment, and that arresting him was deemed as infringing on civil liberties. This particular event has led social media to criticize the NYPD for their actions, seen as tyrannical, and they have planned to set up a petition to release what they call political prisoners who were jailed while allegedly fighting for the motherland. And on one of the groups on Facebook, they warned that more protests across New York City will continue. The NYPD chief had claimed that they were simply following the law, as their demonstrations are deemed illegal, and had made no further comment. Some on the social media had also said that the person was simply abusing the First Amendment for political purposes, but that has not yet been known. The identity of the person arrested by the NYPD is not yet being forwarded to the public at this time. Meanwhile, at Ferguson, Missouri, at least one person was believed to have been shot by riot police to an eye with a rubber bullet. The man, identified as Lucas Kaczynski, was found by riot police to be near Cotton Branch Mortuary and Cremation Services with dozens of protesters behind his back. Police have said that this is an illegal gathering and had ordered the crowd to disperse and return to their homes, but when the leader of the group, Kaczynski, refused, one of the officers said that they had fired a rubber bullet near his head. Eyewitness accounts have varied and are mostly conflicting. Protesters say that they were unarmed and they had been attacked unprovoked, while Ferguson police chief had claimed that the protesters became agitated when they pushed Gaziti away from the police and said they were charging at them before they had no choice but to use pepper spray and smoke grenades, and had resorted to firing rubber bullets and even throwing stun grenades within point-blank range, which had resulted in gassing and injuring both of their parties. All in all, there have been small reports of homicides, including shootings taking place in California and in parts of the Midwest. Their motives are not known at this time. Meanwhile, there have been sporadic reports of similar demonstrations and clashes taking place across Europe, specifically in France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Serbia, Russia, and Ukraine, the latter two of which are the main belligerents of the Russo-Ukrainian War that have been raging since 2014. There are still no exact details of these clashes and demonstrations outside the US as of yet, though there are believed to be a dozen injuries and a few dead.
Це повідомлення передається на запит української влади. Домашнє насильство та вбивства, вчинені прокремлівськими прибічниками проти цивільного населення, особливо в Києві, Луганській, Донецькій, Запорізькій, Харківській, Херсонській, Кіровоградській областях та Автономній Республіці Крим, а також у частинах спеціальних міст Києва та Севастополь, нині зросли втричі. Місцева поліція не змогла стримати ситуацію через ескалацію насильства та скорочення наявного персоналу через російське вторгнення в Україну, яке почалося 2 роки тому. Через ці обставини, згідно з дорученням президента Володимира Зеленського та прем'єр-міністра Дениса Шмигаля, Збройні сили України мають повний контроль над урядом, щоб зробити те, що вони вважають за потрібне, для придушення заворушень для відновлення правопорядку, а також запроваджено воєнний стан. Оголосив для всіх народів припинення будь-якої підривної діяльності. Усіх громадян, які почують це повідомлення, закликають повернутися додому та утриматися від скоєння будь-яких насильницьких злочинів, у тому числі участі в заворушеннях. Порушення правил, встановлених військовими, тягне за собою арешт або розстріл. Якщо ви маєте надзвичайну ситуацію, яка загрожує життю, або якщо ви бачите будь-яку підозрілу активність, негайно наберіть 112. Оскільки служби екстреної допомоги відносно не укомплектовані через російське вторгнення в Україну, деякі дзвінки можуть не проходити, і ви не завжди можете отримати допомогу. Якщо дебошир увірвався у ваше житло, використовуйте всі можливі засоби, щоб захистити себе та свою родину, але пильності не допустите. Якщо ви не в змозі захистити себе, уникайте контакту з бунтівниками або будь-якими злочинцями, які мають намір убити або завдати вам шкоди. Нова інформація та додаткові оновлення та новини щодо цієї ситуації, що розвивається, продовжуватимуть транслюватися на радіо та телебаченні, якщо вони доступні. Слава Україні!
Это государственная система экстренного оповещения. Данная система была введена в действие по распоряжению Федерального правительства России. Это не тест. Примерно 18 часов 7 минут президент РФ объявил военное положение на всей территории Федерации. Это произошло в результате роста насилия между проправительственными и антиправительственными лагерями, которое достигло своего пика после провала российской спецоперации на Украине. Эти антиправительственные и проукраинские участники беспорядков в значительной степени несут ответственность за массовый рост насилия, поскольку уличные драки и физические нападения между двумя проукраинскими и прокремлевскими лагерями стали более распространенными, а также за рост поджогов и вандализма, уничтожения имущества и убийства. Первоначально о беспорядках сообщалось в Москве, но они обострились и были зарегистрированы в нескольких регионах, включая Владивосток, Омск, Волгоград, Санкт-Петербург, Смоленск, Ростов-на-Дону, Челябинск, Саратов и Грозный. В связи с растущей ситуацией насилия, подавляющая местную полицию в этих районах, которая недоукомплектована из-за вторжения в Украину,
This is an emergency message from the BBC News in London, broadcast at the behest of the Majesty's government. Over the past 48 hours, protests and riots have been reported across London, and have spread into other major areas across England and in parts of Wales. As many as over 1,000 or 3,000 were participating in these demonstrations, who are actively supporting Russia and its allies, in response to the Ukrainian victory of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, have reported to had set up protests on monuments and parks across London and in southern England, with reports coming in that small groups of rioters have vandalized both the Ukrainian embassy in London and the Ukrainian consulate in Edinburgh, and have also caused property damage and injuries outside of these areas. The motives of the ongoing civil unrest are claimed to be purely geopolitical, as protesters had repeatedly demanded that the Ukrainian armed forces withdraw from the administrative regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson, whose territories had claimed to have been part of the Russian Federation, following the annexation referendum in September 2022, a referendum that was held during the invasion of Ukraine, and that is deemed illegal under international law. Police and intelligence services suspected that the mass increase of violence was the result of mass increase of disinformation across social media and all tech sites, which had fueled anti-government sentiments, and had been attempting to provoke supporters from either Russia or Ukraine, but they will continue to investigate. If the situation does not improve, it is necessary that martial law must be enacted, and that the British armed forces would intervene, and would do as they see fit to enforce the martial law, and to maintain law and order. All residents hearing this message are strongly advised to shelter in place and stay in your homes. Do not participate in, or start any riots or commit any form of violent crimes related to this ongoing situation. Doing so is grounds for treason, and you will be dealt with accordingly. If you have a life-threatening emergency, dial the emergency telephone line at 999. Leave your telephone lines open for those with actual emergencies. If someone tries to break into your home with malicious intent, use whatever means to protect yourself, including lethal force. Once again, all residents hearing this message are strongly advised to shelter in place and stay in your homes. Do not participate in, or start any riots or commit any form of violent crimes related to this ongoing situation. Doing so is grounds for treason, and you will be dealt with accordingly. We will keep you up to date with the latest information when available.
The civil authorities have issued a shelter-in-place warning for the city of New York. Mass riots and violent clashes have been reported across all 5 boroughs of the city, including Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. These riots have resulted in several fatalities and injuries, along with significant property and infrastructural damage. There are also similar instances occurring outside the city limits. Due to the increasing civil unrest facing the New York City Police Department, the New York National Guard has been called in to aid the New York City Police Department in a mutual assistance operation to restore law and order and to protect life and property. Due to the civil unrest facing the New York City Police Department, all New York City residents are ordered to shelter in place and avoid traveling. If you are found traveling outdoors without valid reason, you will be questioned and searched. Most importantly, do not start or participate in the riots. Repeat, do not start or participate in the riots. Doing so is grounds for immediate arrest without counsel. While martial law is not yet in effect, it may become necessary should the situation intensifies. To repeat, due to the civil unrest facing the New York City Police Department, all New York City residents are ordered to shelter in place and avoid traveling. Do not start or participate in the riots. Doing so is grounds for immediate arrest without counsel. The emergency alert system has been activated to keep you informed. Continue to monitor local news radio or television sources for the latest information on this developing situation.
This message is transmitted at the request by the Royal Mounted Canadian Police and the Government of Canada. Violent attacks between pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian camps have intensified and are now spreading beyond the city limits of Toronto. These areas that are now reporting mass riots and brawls include Richmond Hill, Vaughan, Oakville, Hamilton, Ottawa, Saskatoon, and Vancouver.
Ce message est transmis à la demande de la Gendarmerie royale du Canada et du gouvernement. Les violentes attaques entre les camps pro-russes et pro-ukrainiens se sont intensifiées et s'étendent désormais au-delà des limites de la ville de Toronto. Ces régions qui signalent désormais des émeutes et des bagarres massives comprennent Richmond Hill, Vaughan, Oakville, Hamilton, Ottawa, Saskatoon et Vancouver.
Some of the rioters and attackers have committed acts of homicide against the riot police and against the pro-Ukrainian supporters participating in the demonstration by using their knives and firearms as well as using other weapons to beat civilians. This post-invasion violence has led to the deaths of at least 14 civilians, 5 riot police officers, and almost 10,000 people being injured, along with serious property and infrastructural damage being reported.
Certains émeutiers et assaillants ont commis des actes d'homicide contre la police anti-émeute et contre les partisans pro-ukrainiens participant à la manifestation en utilisant leurs couteaux et leurs armes à feu ainsi qu'en utilisant d'autres armes pour frapper des civils. Ces violences post-invasion ont entraîné la mort d'au moins 14 civils, 5 policiers anti-émeute et près de 10 000 personnes blessées, ainsi que de graves dégâts matériels et infrastructurels signalés.
Due to the increased violence that has overwhelmed the riot police, a state of emergency has been declared and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are now responding to the situation and will do what they deem appropriate to deal with the riots. If the situation continues to worsen, a state of emergency will be elevated to martial law, and the Canadian Armed Forces will be deployed to assist local and federal governments in restoring law and order and protecting life and property.
En raison de la violence accrue qui a submergé la police anti-émeute, l'état d'urgence a été déclaré et la Gendarmerie royale du Canada réagit désormais à la situation et fera ce qu'elle juge approprié pour faire face aux émeutes. Si la situation continue de s'aggraver, l'état d'urgence sera élevé au rang de loi martiale, et les forces armées canadiennes seront déployées pour aider les gouvernements locaux et fédéraux à rétablir l'ordre public et à protéger la vie et les biens.
All residents hearing this message are strongly advised to return to your home and not to go outside for the rest of the night. If you have a life-threatening emergency, call 911 or drive to the nearest hospital. Otherwise, do not travel or use the phone. If you are caught outdoors without a valid reason, you will be questioned and searched. Most importantly, do not start or participate in any riots. Doing so may put yourself at risk of serious injury, arrest, or certain death.
Il est fortement conseillé à tous les résidents entendant ce message de regagner votre domicile et de ne pas sortir dehors pour le reste de la nuit. Si vous avez une urgence mettant votre vie en danger, appelez le 911 ou conduisez jusqu'à l'hôpital le plus proche. Sinon, ne voyagez pas et n'utilisez pas le téléphone. Si vous êtes surpris en extérieur sans raison valable, vous serez interrogé et fouillé. Plus important encore, ne déclenchez ni ne participez à aucune émeute. Cela pourrait vous exposer à un risque de blessure grave, d'arrestation ou de mort certaine.
It is also recommended to remain vigilant and report suspicious activity or any form of misinformation on social media to the police, as they are partly responsible for triggering violent riots and heightening tensions between groups. Continue to monitor local radio or television stations to continue to receive official news, information and instructions regarding this ongoing event.
Il est également recommandé de rester vigilant et de signaler à la police toute activité suspecte ou toute forme de désinformation sur les réseaux sociaux, car elles sont en partie responsables du déclenchement de violentes émeutes et de l'exacerbation des tensions entre groupes. Continuez à surveiller les stations de radio ou de télévision locales pour continuer à recevoir des nouvelles officielles, des informations et des instructions concernant cet événement en cours.
Ovo je emisija za vanredne situacije. Ova poruka prenosi se na zahtev policije Srbije i vlade Srbije. Masovni neredi povezani sa posljedicama ruske invazije na Ukrajinu sada su se proširili na nekoliko drugih administrativnih okruga otkako su se prvi put dogodili u Beogradu pre manje od 48 sati, a sada su eskalirali, neki izgrednici su pribegli činjenju ekstremnih akata nasilja i terorizma pod proruskim transparentom koji su podsticali društveni mediji kao rezultat dezinformacija koje su došle skoro odmah nakon završetka ruske invazije na Ukrajinu. Ovi nasilni zločini počinjeni protiv policije za nerede i proukrajinskih pristalica i drugih posmatrača uključuju pucnjave, premlaćivanja i napade, vandalizam, paljevine, bombaške napade, krađe i ubistva. Zbog sve teže situacije u kojoj se nalazi policija Srbije, predsjednik vlade Republike Srbije je, uz odobrenje predsjednika, proglasio vanredno stanje na nivou okruga za ove pogođene okruge, a policija Srbije, uz vojsku Srbije snage će pomagati lokalnim organima za sprovođenje zakona u suočavanju sa neredima i uspostavljanju reda i zakona. Svi oblici građanskih sloboda, uključujući slobodu izražavanja, govora i okupljanja, bili bi regulisani ili ograničeni u zavisnosti od situacije. Pored toga, policijski čas će biti na snazi od 19 do 7 sati. Imajte na umu da se vanredno stanje i prateći policijski čas mogu proširiti na druge oblasti ako situacija to nalaže. Apeluje se na građane koji slušaju ovaj prenos da se vrate svojim kućama i ne izlaze napolje iz bilo kog razloga u periodu policijskog časa. Svako ko bude uhvaćen na otvorenom tokom policijskog časa biće ili pretresen ili uhapšen. Ovo nije izgovor za pokretanje ili učešće u bilo kom obliku nasilnog zločina, uključujući nerede. Ovo je osnov za hitno hapšenje. Ako pokušate da se oduprete hapšenju, bit ćete ugašeni.
The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and numerous state-level governments. The rise of mass homicides and violent riots and clashes across much of the United States has now created a significant danger to civilian life, especially in the metropolitan areas of New York, Boston, Los Angeles, Dallas, Chicago, Minneapolis-St. Paul, San Francisco, and Greater Washington, where crime perpetrated by suspected pro-Kremlin supporters has skyrocketed. Reports have also claimed that some of the individuals now resort to committing terrorism against groups and establishments suspected to be supporting or in solidarity with Ukraine, including bombings and political assassinations, which had been fueled due to mass disinformation and cybersecurity breaches on both government and local internet servers. Due to the civil danger present, it is determined that normal activities cannot continue until the current threat is resolved. Effective at 12 a.m. tomorrow, martial law will go into effect for all 50 U.S. states, as well as offshore unincorporated territories of American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, as pursuant of the 1976 National Emergencies Act, in an effort to minimize the ongoing violent disturbances and to maintain law and order. The United States Armed Forces will be mobilized to deal with this situation and do whatever measures they see fit to enforce martial law, including putting down any violent riots or criminal acts with necessary lethal force. Freedoms of assembly, expression, and speech, along with other civil liberties or personal freedoms listed in the U.S. Bill of Rights or the United States Constitution, will be curtailed or even completely restricted. Temporary restrictive measures are also to be put into place, including a mandatory curfew between 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. for all residents. All modes of public transportation will be suspended until further notice. All businesses with the exception of essential companies will be required to close. All internet services and social media sites will continue to function, but its use will be heavily monitored by cybersecurity authorities and will take whatever measures to stop the spread of blatant disinformation, along with the potential cybersecurity breaches on cellular and satellite infrastructures. Police and military personnel will routinely patrol the country for any martial law violators and will cooperate alongside intelligence agencies to keep watch for any suspicious activities. Residents are urged to take the following actions to ensure your safety and survival. Return indoors before the curfew period and do not go outside until the curfew period ends. If you are caught committing acts of violence at any time, you will be arrested. This included the participation of riots, and it is currently considered as grounds for immediate arrest. If you attempt to resist arrest, you will be shot and killed, no questions asked. If you are caught outside for any reason during the curfew period, you will be detained for the rest of the curfew period. If you were caught violating the curfew more than once, you will be charged. The homeless, the elderly, and people with special needs or those who are unable to find shelter will be accommodated accordingly. Be sure to have your emergency supplies prepared for your stay, such as food, water, clothing, extra batteries, medical supplies, flashlight, and a battery-powered radio or television. If you have a life-threatening emergency, dial 911, or tie a red cloth to a visible location of your house, and military authorities will help you. Use telephone lines for actual emergencies only. If someone tries to break into your home, you are authorized to use whatever means necessary to protect you and your property, including lethal force. The restrictive measures are meant to be temporary, and will remain in effect until the situation is under control. Repeating, effective at 12 a.m. tomorrow, martial law will go into effect for all 50 U.S. states, as well as offshore unincorporated territories of American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and the U.S. Armed Forces will be mobilized in an effort to minimize the ongoing violent disturbances and to maintain law and order. The emergency alert system has been activated to keep you informed. Thank you for your cooperation.
The following message is transmitted at the request of the San Francisco Police Department, the California National Guard, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the United States government. The martial law for the entire United States has now been lifted. The riots and violent crimes stemmed by the pro-Russian unrest has now mostly subsided to the point that it no longer became a threat to normal civilian life. However, all residents must stay indoors and not go outside until 7 a.m. when the curfew will conclude for the final time. Anyone caught outdoors during this final curfew period will be detained or charged. All residents are urged not to start or participate in any riots. Doing so may put yourself at risk of arrest or certain death. Unruly behavior will not be tolerated. You will be arrested. If you have a life-threatening medical emergency, dial 911, and military authorities will help you. Leave phone lines open for those who really need it. If you have a life-threatening emergency, dial 911, and military authorities will help you. Leave your phone lines open for those who really need it. Repeating, the martial law for the entire United States has now been lifted. At this time, all residents must stay indoors and not go outside for the final curfew period or you will be arrested. Do not attempt to start or participate in any riots or you will be arrested. This concludes all activations of the emergency alert system. Normal programming will now resume momentarily. Your government would like to thank all citizens for your cooperation during this emergency.
Hey guys, it's David RGD. As you may have just seen, I cannot stress enough that what you've been seeing is one of many outcomes of what the conclusion of the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine would be like. And because of that, it should be minded and you should know that this scenario should not be treated as a final outcome, and this is most likely not going to be accurate as shown. We still do not know what happens for both Ukraine and Russia, and to that extent the whole world, but particularly the Western world going forward even after if that invasion is over. This scenario was made based on how I view the war and how I put social media into the equation given what I had experienced lately, and frankly to show how pessimistic I was, partially, because even if the war ends by today or tomorrow, next month or a year, the trouble is, no matter what the outcome of the Russian invasion of Ukraine can get, whether either side gets nuked or if Ukraine or Russia wins territorially or diplomatically, in the end, it's the people on both sides, innocent civilians, or whatever some would say, and frankly I can say that too, that there are no such thing as innocents anyhow, who would take the huge brunt of this conflict by losing their lives or their homes and their husbands or wives, families, and loved ones, leaving them emotionally and psychologically scarred and traumatized by the horrors of war. Many of the children whose fathers and or potentially mothers that have been sent to the front lines may soon end up to be war orphans, or being with their widows as a result of the war that ultimately does nothing but to stir up more despair and ideological and political tensions in the long term rather than achieving any meaningful results. And even after all of that, the tensions between the two sides, both from the top as leaders and to the bottom as supporters within, the people who supported the politicians, will always remain and will always be at each other's throats. The war may be over, but given the current time and era, and give or take, if you think about disinformation and propaganda, then you get the gist that it is far from over. Let's just say, if someone on the losing side refused to accept the reality of whatever outcome, let's just say if Ukraine wins the war, then they do anything to keep the war going, even if it means bringing the war to their home territory. That being said, it could apply to pro-Ukrainians if they refuse to accept, but then again, we may never know if things would be the same. But our world's always changing, so be it better or for worse, so it always isn't going to be either way. To be honest, I don't have any good advice on how to deal with what's coming at you, or especially what am I going to say to anyone who gets conflicting information on whichever side you're on, at the time where the truth is always being challenged or distorted to the point it is full-blown propaganda at this point. But one thing I can say is to always watch your backs. Watch your backs. No matter what side you're on, if you're objectively supporting the war or not, or if they wish to pretend it never happened, if there's something going on that's threatening in your life, just know, if people have the will to do anything, be if it's an actual internet troll or a political activist, or someone who would go for extreme lengths to do the unthinkable, just always look out for yourself and watch what you can say or do. Given what I witnessed, like when a pro-Russian blogger gets bombed in St. Petersburg back in April 2023, it sent alarm bells, at least to me. Once when a pro-Russian blogger or supporter gets killed, then there's the possibility that any pro-Russian supporter would do the same to anyone opposed to what was once called a special military operation, be it in Russia or anywhere across the world. And assume if Ukraine wins and the other refuses to accept defeat, then you may get the recipe for disaster. But only if the conditions are right, and hopefully it may not come down to what you've just seen. So yeah, this is how I actually felt about the war. This war. Not just because of whichever atrocities both sides commit, but after the war is over, then whichever outcome, it may not be the same. I have never once shared my views of the war publicly by saying this on my channel, and when the Russian invasion of Ukraine began, I was trying to write or produce a scenario of this sort about it, but I was initially discouraged to do so until now. Anyway, that's probably all I can say. I don't want to go into detail of what that outcome will be like, or to imagine what people would do to you or to anyone, be it if whoever supports Putin or Zelensky, or whichever if you try to be neutral. Because again, we don't know for certain. But I hope it won't come down to this. Oh, and one more thing. Remember in the speech called on conducting the special military operation, when Vladimir Putin says they're prepared for any outcome, well, I can just say we should too. We should also be prepared for any outcome. That is all. Goodbye.